We begin again with news of a massacre in America. This time, a deadly rampage turned a holiday party into horror. It happened Wednesday at a social service center in San Bernardino, California. 14 people were killed. Another 17 are hurt. Hundreds of people evacuated the complex after the shooters fired.
The suspects are a married couple. Police killed them a few hours later in a violent confrontation about a mile from the shooting scene. One officer was wounded.
This was supposed to be a happy occasion, a holiday banquet, but it suddenly turned into an active shooter scene. We're actually learning some more details this morning about the people who were inside the building at the time. Also, there is new information this morning about the husband and wife team who police say organized this massacre. So we're going to start with Carter Evans, who is here with me. Carter, good morning.
Nora, the suspects are dead now. They were killed in a rampage a couple of hours after the shooting. Now, one police officer was injured in that shootout. He is in the hospital with non-life-threatening injuries. As for the reason behind the massacre, that is still a mystery.
The response out here is immense.
The first reports of gunfire came at around 11 a.m. local time. Police say there were two assailants, a man and a woman.
They came prepared to do what they did, as if they were on a mission.
Each suspect had a long gun, a pistol, tactical type clothing that was loaded with magazines, extra magazines for a gunfight.
Just a bunch of shots, multiple shots going off like crazy, just one right after the other.
This man's wife could see the building where San Bernardino County employees were attending a holiday party. What did your wife see?
The guy outside, dressed all in black with a big gun, just shooting at the window.
Terry Pettit's daughter Holly texted him from inside the building.
Shooting at my work, people shot, in the office waiting for cops.
But she's okay.
Pray for us.
Some of the injured were treated at a triage center outside, while others were being evacuated by law enforcement, as caught on this cell phone video.
I'll take a bullet before you do, that's for damn sure. Just be cool, okay?
The assailants escaped, and authorities placed all local government buildings on lockdown. They reported a black SUV fleeing the scene, and approximately 4.5 hours later, at around 3:30 local time, police hunting for the killers riddled a black SUV with gunfire in a shootout caught on police scanner audio.
San Bernardino and Shedden. We can see one guy down. There's one guy in the back of the car.
People living nearby quickly took cover.
We started like ducking down, and then they started shooting again further down the street over there, and there's just a hail of bullets, just a rain of bullets everywhere.
The two suspects killed were identified as 28-year-old U.S.-born Saeed Farouk and his wife, Tashfeen Malik. Authorities still haven't determined a motive for the assault.
There have been at least 56 mass shootings already this year. We've seen President Obama speak after so many of them, and he addressed this latest rampage last night. ABC's John Carlos at the White House with that. Good morning, John.
Good morning, George. This is the fifth time the president has had to comment on a mass shooting just in the last 5 months. In an interview just as the news was breaking about this shooting, the president said incidents like this are simply too common here in the United States. And even before knowing anything about the shooters or how they got their weapons, he said it is time for Congress to pass tougher gun laws.
Yeah, we have a pattern now of mass shootings in this country that has no parallel anywhere else in the world. And there's some steps we could take, not to eliminate every one of these mass shootings, but to improve the odds that they don't happen as frequently.
And this happened just after the president returned from Paris, where he visited the site of the deadliest of the attacks that rocked that city less than 3 weeks ago, laying a rose at a memorial outside the Bataclan Theater for the victims. The president has called his inability to stop gun violence here in the United States the greatest frustration of his presidency. And George, as you mentioned at the top of the show, with 14 dead, this is the deadliest mass shooting in this country since what happened in Newton, Connecticut, at the massacre at the elementary school 3 years ago.
The hunt for ISIS followers in America now extends to all 50 states. The George Washington University program on extremism reports 56 suspects have been captured so far this year for alleged ties to ISIS. That is the highest number of terror arrests in this country in a single year since the 9/11 attacks. The FBI is investigating the most cases in New York and Minnesota. Jeff Begay shows us what makes this manhunt so tough.
Of the 71 people charged so far with ISIS-related activities, most are men and 25 years old or younger, and they come from an array of ethnic groups and socioeconomic and educational statuses.
No common profile spread throughout the country.
Lorenzo Vidino is one of the report's authors. So there's no cookie-cutter ID of who these people are.
Could not be more heterogeneous.
And that's a problem for law enforcement.
Profiling absolutely does not work.
No other case is perhaps more representative of that than the arrest of a Mississippi couple in August. Mohammed Daklala and Jalen Young were arrested after the FBI noticed their pro-ISIS Twitter posts. Over the last year, FBI Director James Comey has said repeatedly that his agents have their work cut out for them.
There isn't a particular demographic, either it's the location or to age. The Syria travelers early on ranged from something like 18 to 63.
The report says the so-called ISIS U.S. echo chamber continues to attract followers on Twitter with posts like this one. Mujahideen are true, real men. 300 American ISIS sympathizers involved in the U.S. ISIS Twitter scene were monitored during the study, and nearly one-third of the tracked accounts are purportedly operated by women. A lot of what's said online is just talk, but the report concludes that at some point, a subset of Americans inside the domestic ISIS bubble will move from chatter to action.
Two mosques were closed last week in Lyon and in Gennevilliers because of Islamist radicalization, as well as several clandestine prayer rooms. I can announce to you today that a third closure has taken place at the Lagny Mosque. This morning, a major police operation that began at 5:30 a.m. led to the searching and closing of the Lagny-sur-Marne Mosque in Seine-et-Marne. And this operation has already led to 22 people being banned from leaving the country.
A suspected homemade cluster bomb exploded Tuesday on an overpass in Istanbul. One person was slightly injured. The bomb was left on a barrier on the overpass near a metro station. The explosion occurred at 5:30 p.m. during rush hour. The noise was heard in other parts of the city. The bomb exploded seconds after a minibus carrying riot police passed under the overpass. That has led to speculation about a targeted attack. Police have heightened security in the area while cordoning off the scene. Tensions are high in Turkey following the murder on Saturday of a top Kurdish lawyer by unknown gunmen in a southeastern province.
Now, the BBC headquarters and surrounding offices have been evacuated amid a bomb scare in central London. The Metropolitan Police said the area outside BBC's new broadcasting house was cordoned off following reports of a suspicious vehicle parked at a Portland place. The staff working at several businesses on the road were not allowed to return to the buildings while the investigation was underway. Scotland Yard later confirmed that the alert had been cancelled and the vehicle was found non-suspicious. Police in London remain on a heightened state of alert following the terror attacks in Paris earlier this month, but appealed for the public to remain vigilant.
Terror raids outside London this morning as the war against ISIS enters a new phase, with the U.S. pledging to put more special forces on the ground inside Iraq and Syria.
It happened this morning just north of London. An anti-terror police operation still underway right now. 4 men arrested. 7 separate addresses are being searched as Europe remains braced for more attacks after Paris. And we now know the new U.S. boots on the ground fighting ISIS on the battlefields of Iraq and Syria.
Intensifying the pressure on ISIS. Backing up the airstrikes that have pounded their positions for months, Defense Secretary Carter announcing a new deployment of U.S. Special Forces to the region.
We're at war. We're using the might of the finest fighting force the world has ever known.
The Pentagon says 100 to 150 Special Forces troops will be based in Iraq and conduct ground combat raids against ISIS in both Iraq and Syria. Their mission? Gather intelligence, free ISIS hostages, kill or capture ISIS leaders. It's all part of the effort to carry the fight to ISIS. But Carter was grilled about how successful the American effort really is.
Are we winning, Mr. Secretary?
We will win.
Are we winning now?
We're going to win.
And with regard to sending even more troops over to the Middle East, they don't have a strategy. And President Obama has admitted this over and over again, that he doesn't have a strategy. And so if we don't have any strategy to win against ISIS, then the president just sending more and more troops in harm's way without a plan to win, that doesn't make any sense.
Moving on to our next story, Iraq's prime minister has rejected the deployment of new U.S. troops to his country after Washington announced it's sending dozens of forces there to fight Daesh terrorists. Haydar al-Abadi said Iraq does not need foreign ground forces on its territory. Abadi further stressed that any military operation or troop deployment anywhere in Iraq must be approved by Baghdad in full respect for Iraq's sovereignty. Members of Iraqi Popular Forces fighting ISIL Takfiris have also condemned any like the U.S. deployment.
You cannot fight terrorism while you are supporting the terrorists directly with armaments and having alliance with the staunchest supporters of terrorism in the world, which is the Saudi kingdom. You cannot. This is contradiction. You cannot the police and the thief at the same time. You have to choose either way to stand.
Iran reiterates its support for the Syrian government on Sunday, saying it's Iran's duty to do so. The remark was made by Ali Akbar Velayati upon his arrival in Damascus. As advisor to Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, Velayati said it's the West that have been inflicting the civil war on Syria, but Tehran is determined to back Damascus on its fight against terrorism. The United States and its allies do not see Bashar al-Assad as the Syria's legitimate leader. They back the opposition and rebels, which aim to oust him. Yet Russia and Iran recognize Assad as the legitimate Syrian authority.
Israel not only sent its troops to Syria, it's now seeking cooperation with Russia in their respective military missions there. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu admitted for the first time Tuesday that Israeli troops have been operating in Syria. The operation is allegedly intended to prevent Syria from becoming a front against Israel. Netanyahu met with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Paris. He stressed that cooperation with Russia militarily is important to prevent clashes over Syria. On Sunday, the Israeli defense minister said a Russian warplane had recently entered Israeli-controlled airspace from Syria, but the flyover was resolved without incident.
The Israeli military has launched a series of large-scale surprise drills south of the occupied territories. Israeli regime forces as well as local troops are participating in the war games. Palestinian military experts say the exercises are carried out in the face of the latest uprising by Palestinians.
The Israeli military has launched surprise exercises in areas surrounding the Gaza Strip and the western Negev desert. According to the Israeli army, the drill is aimed at maintaining troops' preparedness and to simulate incursions and rocket fires from the besieged territory. Meanwhile, Palestinian military experts say the drills are meant to convey a message to Israelis living in those areas. They say Tel Aviv is trying to give assurances to Israelis that the current popular uprising by Palestinians would be dealt with more violent to crack down.
Both the political and military leadership in Israel are in an embarrassing situation. They're unable to face what's going on in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. Tel Aviv wants to ensure the security of Israelis, but these are normal drills aimed at boosting the resolve of Israeli soldiers.
During the current uprising, Palestinians from the Gaza Strip have in many occasions clashed with Israeli soldiers. A number of them were killed and some others wounded. Observers believe Israel is worried about potential attacks, including rocket firing from the besieged Gaza.
There was a statement by Israel's Minister of Military Affairs, Yellen, several days ago. He predicted that the current Palestinian uprising will continue. This means that Israel might be afraid of any attacks from the Gaza Strip. This is why Israel wants to keep its army ready and mobilized for any unexpected situation.
The exercises required assembling military equipment, which included large numbers of aircraft, armored vehicles, troops, as well as artillery units. Several other drills have been conducted by the Israeli army so far this year.
The anti-terror campaign in Syria and Iraq is pushing Islamic State militants to look for a new stronghold, which they're apparently finding in Libya. The new ISIL foothold in the country is in the northern town of Sirte. Worryingly, its location is just across the Mediterranean from the coasts of Europe. The number of militants there has risen from 200 fighters a year ago to at least 2,000 today. The group has already established a strict Sharia law and carried out several public executions. And EU leaders have started sounding the alarm over the new neighbours.
We must put in place in Libya what they've been waiting for a long time, which is the establishment of a national unity government and the provision of security throughout the country's territory in order to prevent Daesh from gaining ground.
It will be fundamental for everyone to give absolute priority to the Libya issue, which risks becoming the next emergency.
The editor of the Pan-African Newswire, Abayomi Azakiwe, says the current instability in Libya is the main factor allowing ISIL to gain momentum there.
Many of their fighters are relocating to Libya, where there's a huge power vacuum. In that city, the basic infrastructure has been broken down. There is a huge presence of poverty. So therefore, the Islamic State, which is well funded by elements within the Middle East, elements within NATO, and they are able to step into these political situations.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has denounced Turkey's downing of a Russian bomber on the Syrian border as a huge mistake. Speaking on the sidelines of a climate change summit in Paris, Putin said Ankara's move was, quote, dictated by the desire to defend the ISIL or Daesh's oil supplies to Turkey. The Russian president noted that he refused to meet with Turkish President Erdogan on the sidelines of the summit. Putin's snub comes after the Turkish leader called for face-to-face talks in Paris to discuss the issue.
Has reiterated accusations about Turkey's murky oil dealings with Islamic State, something Ankara strongly denies. Russia has been targeting tankers that ISIL's using to deliver oil via backdoor trade routes, which are widely believed to cross the Syria-Turkey border. Moscow says there's information that smuggling occurs on an industrial scale. From land, the terrorists apparently loaded onto tankers to ship the oil elsewhere. And the Russian President Vladimir Putin repeated the claims at Monday's top climate gathering conference in France.
We have every reason to believe that the decision to shoot down our bomber was dictated by a desire to ensure the security of those delivery routes to Turkey. Protecting the Turkmen is only a pretext. A broad-based anti-terrorism coalition cannot be achieved as long as some continue to use terrorist organizations to reach their short-term political goals.
As both accusations and indirect evidence pile up on Turkey, President Erdogan has raised the stakes. He's promised to resign if Moscow's allegations prove to be true.
Neither Russia or any other country has a right to engage in slander against Turkey by saying that Turkey is buying oil from ISIL. Turkey can't have such poor ethics that it buys oil from terrorists. I would offer my resignation if they offered any proof to these accusations. But if those who make this accusation cannot prove, then they should resign. We don't want to escalate the crisis. We want to activate diplomatic channels. We know that escalating the problem won't serve anyone's interests.
the US has reacted to revelations made by Russia's defense ministry that Turkey is buying oil from Islamic State. Pentagon spokesman Steve Warren called Ankara a reliable partner in the fight against terrorists, something which contradicts earlier statements from Washington.
We flatly reject any notion that the Turks are somehow working with ISIL. That is preposterous and really very kind of ridiculous. The Turks have been great partners to us in the fight against ISIL.
Our allies in the region were our largest problem in Syria. The Turks were great friends, and I have a great relationship with Erdogan. What did they do? They poured hundreds of millions of dollars and tens, thousands of tons of weapons into anyone who would fight against Assad, except that the people who were being supplied were al-Nusra and al-Qaeda and the extremist elements of jihadis coming from other parts of the world.
RT's Gayanet Chichakyan was at a US State Department briefing regarding these allegations.
The State Department sounded rather dismissive of the information Russia provided on the smuggling of oil into Turkey. The State Department spokesperson was not even willing to confirm definitively that some of the oil generated by ISIL goes to Turkey. Here.
What we've seen is that ISIL very often sells its oil, as I said, at the wellhead. So as it comes out of the ground, there's smugglers, there's middlemen, there's truckers who then take that through these established routes. Some of them, no doubt, probably lead to parts of Turkey. I can't categorically rule that out.
Aerial images show huge convoys with what Russia says are oil trucks crossing the Turkish-Syrian border unhindered. And one of the images shows, and there are many, shows 240 trucks on the Turkish side of the border and over 40 similar trucks on the Syrian side of the border.
Again,
are you saying that it doesn't raise any red flags here?
Well, look, first of all, I'm not going to speak to the credibility of your satellite imagery from this podium, certainly. Secondly, no, we've never said that oil smuggling from ISIL is not a problem. What I'm trying to say is that there's no Turkish government complicity in some operation to buy illegal oil from ISIL. It's just, we just don't believe that to be true in any way, shape, or form.
We heard at the State Department is that the U.S. Rejects Russia's allegations essentially because it trusts Turkey.
Speak for all elements of the Turkish government? Are you able to,
Matt,
say that there isn't anyone? I mean, how are you so sure?
We work very closely with the Turks. We've been in dialogue with them, discussions with them. They're a NATO ally and a trusted partner.
As coalition attacks on ISIL-controlled oil sites intensify, militants are being forced to look not only for a new stronghold, but also for new sources of income. The Russian Drug Control Service has warned that the terrorists already make $1 billion annually from selling Afghan heroin. And that sum is rising almost as fast as the production of the drug, which skyrocketed 50 times since 2001. Mr. Azakiwi again says it's no wonder ISIL is making advances in drug trafficking in the region.
It's quite obvious that Turkey and other states within the region had been funneling resources to ISIS. Now, where the situation has changed, the lines of supply has been severely disrupted. So therefore, it is not surprising that ISIS would be involved in other illicit forms of revenue generation. After the United States intervened in Afghanistan, the production of poppies and consequently opium and other forms of opiate drugs flourished. This so-called war on terrorism is in fact fueling trafficking of illegal drugs.
A new UN report on heroin and opium trafficking in Afghanistan has made many people and political figures point the finger at the US-led foreign forces. They say the US and other Western states have failed to help tackle drug trafficking, accusing them of benefiting from poppy cultivation in Afghanistan.
I think that the presence of NATO and the United States in Afghanistan for 14 years has been aimed at supporting opium trafficking from this country to the entire world to pour more money into their own pockets.
Many Afghans also accuse the US-led foreign forces of hindering local efforts to combat drug trafficking. They cite as an example a US-led airstrike that killed over a dozen counter-narcotics police officers in the southern province of Helmand in September 2015.
We remember how a number of the Afghan counter-narcotics police forces were killed at the hands of foreign troops in southern Helmand province. This proves that they do not want to eliminate this phenomenon. Instead, they want to eliminate those who are fighting against opium cultivation in Afghanistan.
In its latest report, the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime has said that the total value of illicit heroin and opium trafficked from Afghanistan to Western Europe amounts to some $28 billion every year.
US President Barack Obama has criticized Russia for its airstrikes in Syria, accusing Moscow of not aligning itself with the US-led coalition there.
I think it's an indication that Mr. Putin recognizes there is not going to be a military resolution to the situation in Syria. The Russians now have been there for several weeks, over a month. And I think fair-minded reporters who've looked at the situation would say that the situation hasn't changed significantly. In the interim, Russia's lost a commercial passenger jet. You've seen another jet shot down. There have been losses in terms of Russian personnel.
Speaking with the Russian president in Paris, President Obama has reportedly expressed regret over the downing of the Russian plane by Turkey. Does regret mean a condemnation of what Turkey did? Well, I didn't hear that at the State Department this Monday. This was the first briefing after Thanksgiving holidays. I went to ask about the U.S. assessment of what happened with the Russian plane because last week Reuters quoted an unnamed source in the Obama administration saying the U.S. believes the Russian plane was hit inside Syrian airspace after a brief incursion into Turkish airspace. But the State Department official has left out that part of the U.S. assessment and refused to comment further on the incident.
What I would note, we support Turkey's right to defend its territory and airspace.
Does the U.S. believe that the Russian plane was shut down while in the Syrian airspace?
So we believe that the Russian plane violated Turkish airspace.
But where was it shut down?
I'm going to leave it there. Okay.
So the State Department sticks to its line that Turkey had the right to defend its airspace and also refuses to openly confirm that the plane was hit in Syrian airspace. You see, there is a reason why the Obama administration is choosing to make such a statement through an unnamed source. And I was trying to get the reason why, but the State Department official refused to answer. One of the reasons could be that if the U.S. did openly confirm it, then the assertion that Turkey had the right to defend itself would completely fall apart in this case.
NATO is discussing new measures to help defend Turkey's border after the country shot down a Russian warplane. Some NATO countries privately consider Turkey's actions to have been hot-headed, but all again express solidarity and some strong support.
Frankly speaking, Turkey reconfirmed credibility of NATO to defend airspace.
NATO is considering the deployment of more air defense systems to Turkey, similar to the US-made Patriot batteries already in place, as well as a stronger naval presence in the Mediterranean. Another priority, broader threats in the Middle East and North Africa.
The security environment in which we meet today is dark. Terrorist attacks, violent instability, the breach of international rules. These are serious challenges from many different directions, and NATO is responding.
The organization is also worried about advanced missile systems Russia has deployed in Syria, capable of downing NATO aircraft.
This is part of a pattern where we see that Russia is developing what is called anti-access area denial capabilities. And that is exactly one of the reasons why NATO is adapting. That's the reason why we have increased the readiness and the preparedness of our forces.
NATO's chief said he hoped to introduce more predictability in NATO's relationship with Russia, which is also angry that the bloc is considering an invitation to Montenegro to become its 29th member. Montenegro was once part of the former Yugoslavia, and Russia still considers it part of its sphere of influence. That's why the Kremlin has warned that any attempt to integrate the country into NATO will be seen as a clear provocation.
Russia has warned of retaliation against NATO's expansion into Eastern Europe. The spokesman for the Russian president says Montenegro's accession would force Moscow to react. Dmitry Peskov added that Russia has always said that NATO's continued expansion to the east would lead to retaliatory actions to provide security and support national interests. Peskov's comments are made as the U.S.-led military alliance has invited Montenegro to become NATO's 29th member. This is NATO's first expansion into Eastern Europe since Albania and Croatia joined 6 years ago.
Guatemala's Fuego volcano is at it again, erupting early Monday, spewing lava into the night sky. The volcano, about 40 kilometers southwest of Guatemala City, has had at least 3 large lava flows reported in recent days.
The president was in Paris, of course, with nearly 150 other leaders pushing for action on climate change. And tonight, a new warning from Chinese authorities urging families to stay indoors. From Beijing this evening, the image of 2 people there wearing their masks. You can barely make out the building right behind them. And in the middle of it all, ABC's Bob Woodruff on the streets of Beijing with what he found.
This is today in China. Most people staying off the normally crowded streets. In Tiananmen Square, the background barely visible.
So this is what it normally looks like here in Beijing as the sun goes down and the cars turn on their headlights. But the sad news is, because of all this pollution, this is noon.
That heavy smog stopping traffic on the highways. That sign right there is a warning to drivers, reading visibility low, slow down the speed. The government issuing an alert, advising residents to avoid being outdoors, ordering factories to shut down temporarily, schools keeping the kids inside. This playground empty. As we walked around the city today, everywhere we looked, masks, even on China's youngest, as this country desperately grapples with how to keep its people safe.
A dire warning for the world as Pope Francis leaves Africa. With world leaders gathered in Paris to find a solution on climate change, the Pope says the stakes could not be any higher.
I am not sure, but I could say to you, now or never. From the first one, which I believe was held in Tokyo, no? To now, little has been done. Every year, the problems are getting more serious.
He uses powerful language.
We are at the limits. If I may use a strong word, I would say that we are at the limits of suicide. Pope Francis's final day in Africa brought him to the heart of sectarian violence in the troubled nation of Central African Republic. But despite simmering tensions with Christians in the country, Bangai's Muslims gave the pontiff a warm welcome. Together with Imam Tidiana Musa Naibi, the Pope visited a mosque in the PK5 neighborhood, a district where tit-for-tat killings have claimed more than 100 lives since late September. Inside, Pope Francis implored Christians and Muslims to end a spiral of hate, vendetta, and bloodshed. Healing rifts between Christian and Muslim communities has been a theme for the Pope throughout his first visit to Africa. Sectarian violence in Central African Republic has killed thousands and displaced many more. Still, despite the tensions, both Christians and Muslims have welcomed the Pope, hoping his visit will spur renewed dialogue to help restore peace.
Germany's Vice-Chancellor has warned that its country is now likely to receive more than 1 million migrants and refugees this year alone. And the issue of how to accommodate them all is rapidly gaining urgency. With space at a premium in Berlin, the authorities are now looking at rather unconventional sites, as Peter Oliver reports.
Built by Hitler as the Third Reich's gateway to the world, Tempelhof Airport became a crucial supply line during the Berlin blockade. Since its closure in 2008, it's become the city's biggest park, popular with families, joggers, and a venue for music festivals. And now this site has taken on another role in the history of modern Berlin. It's being used to house some of the hundreds of thousands of refugees that have fled here to Germany. But that's not all gone smoothly. Fears are a camp similar to the Calais jungle could grow in the heart of the German capital, with scenes like this already taking place. A mass brawl involving hundreds of refugees kicked off inside the building. 100 police officers had to be sent in to restore order.
The issue is that there are plenty of young men traveling alone, which lead to aggression bursting out in all directions. We have to stay back and ask the security guards to stand down.
Locals feel that scenes like Sunday's unrest were inevitable.
We have to be careful putting different cultures and religions together where they can harm one another. But I don't think segregation would work. They have to learn to get along.
A lot of people in the same place, in a small place, you know, sometimes you get aggressive, you know. That's the problem, you know.
U.S. National Women's Studies Association has voted to join the international boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement against Israel. The measure passed 653 to 86 at the organization's annual conference. Now, back in January, the association released a statement in solidarity with Palestinians. The group said it cannot overlook the injustice, including sexual and gender-based violence against Palestinians in their own territories. A number of international academic associations and unions also support the BDS movement. On November 11th, the European Commission passed new guidelines mandating the labeling that is of products made in Israeli settlements. The BDS movement is a global campaign that uses economic and political pressure on Israel in line with the goal of ending the occupation of Palestinian land.
The U.S. economy has recovered substantially since the Great Recession. The unemployment rate, which peaked at 10% in October 2009, declined to 5% in October of this year. The economy has come a long way toward the FOMC's objectives of maximum employment and price stability. When the committee begins to normalize the stance of policy, doing so will be a testament also to how far our economy has come in recovering from the effects of the financial crisis and the Great Recession. And in that sense, it is a day that I expect we are all looking forward to.